Unexpected arrivals. Jake Morrison stood in his wheat field, watching the golden stalks sway in the afternoon breeze of Kepler 442b. The sight should have filled him with pride, but instead, worry gnawed at his gut. The harvest season was only 3 weeks away, and his automated harvesting drones had finally given up the ghost. 40 years of frontier farming had taught him that when machines failed out here, you either fixed them with human hands or watched your crops rot in the field. He pulled out his communicator and scrolled through the job posting he'd uploaded to the planetary network for the 5th time that day. Harvest workers needed. Hard work, fair pay, room and board included. Experience preferred, but will train the right candidates. Still no responses. Most young folks these days wanted jobs in the growing cities, not backbreaking work under the deep twin suns of this frontier world. Jake's grandfather had been among the first wave of human settlers to terraform Kepler 442b. 3 generations of Morrisons had turned this patch of wilderness into one of the most productive wheat farms in the outer colonies. But now at 62, Jake was facing the possibility that it might all end with him. His son lived on Earth working as a computer engineer, showing no interest in continuing the family legacy. A distant rumble made him look up. A small spacecraft was approaching, trailing black smoke and flying far too low for a normal landing. Approach. Jake's hand instinctively moved to the pulse rifle at his hip. Living on the frontier meant always being ready for trouble, whether it came from claim jumpers, raiders, or worse. The ship crash-landed in his north pasture with a grinding screech of twisted metal. Jake climbed into his utility vehicle and drove toward the wreckage, his rifle ready but not drawn. As he approached, he could see the vessel was of alien design, its hull bearing the flowing, organic curves typical of Vallani craftsmanship. Steam hissed from multiple ruptures in the engine housing. The airlock cycled open with a grinding sound, and 5 figures emerged slowly. Jake had seen Vallani before during his occasional trips to the trading stations, but never this close to his farm. They were tall and graceful, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Their large dark eyes held depths of intelligence and emotion that had always impressed him about their species. These 5 were all females, Jake realized, recognizing the distinctive cranial ridges that marked gender among the Vallani. They wore simple traveling clothes that had seen better days, and each bore the ritual scarification on their foreheads that indicated widowhood in their culture. The eldest of the group stepped forward, her movements careful and non-threatening. "Human, farmer," she said in accented but clear English. "I am Zara of the Moonrise clan. We do not come as conquerors or thieves. We come seeking sanctuary." Jake kept his hand near his weapon but didn't draw it. Sanctuary from what? The Vallani woman's companions moved closer, and Jake could see exhaustion etched in every line of their bodies. One of the younger ones, barely, more than an adolescent by Vallani standards, swayed on her feet from fatigue. "The consortium came to our colony world of Veltar," Zara continued, her voice heavy with grief. "They said our husbands were trafficking in illegal genetic modifications. The charges were false, but the consortium courts do not listen to Vallani testimony. Our mates were imprisoned, then executed. Our homes were seized. We 5 managed to escape in this ship." Jake had heard rumors about the growing power of the corporate consortium in the outer systems. They were expanding their influence, using legal technicalities and military might to seize valuable worlds from smaller species. The Galactic government was either unable or unwilling to stop them. "Why come here?" Jake asked. "Why my farm?" The youngest of the group, despite her obvious exhaustion, stepped forward with dignity. "We intercepted your employment transmission. We know agriculture. Our people have been farmers for 10,000 years. We ask not for charity, but for the chance to work, to earn our place." Jake studied them carefully. Their clothes were worn but clean, their bearing proud despite their desperate circumstances. These weren't raiders or refugees looking for an easy mark. They were survivors, skilled workers who had lost everything and were willing to do whatever it took to rebuild their lives. "You know what you're asking?" Jake said finally. "The consortium has reached out here too. If they're hunting you, harboring you could bring me trouble." Zara nodded sadly. "We know the risk we bring to your door. If you turn us away, we understand. We have tried 17 other worlds. All refused us. Humans are our last hope. The irony struck Jake immediately. Humans were considered the troublemakers of the galaxy, the ones who picked fights with larger powers and refused to bow to authority. Yet here were 5 alien widows, turned away by every other species, seeking shelter from the very humans most of the galaxy viewed with suspicion. "The work's hard," Jake said after a long moment of consideration. "Sunrise to sunset during harvest season. Pays fair but not generous. And the consortium comes knocking. I can't guarantee your safety." Relief flooded the faces of all 5 Villani women. The youngest one actually stumbled, caught by her companions as the tension left her body. "We will not bring dishonor to your generosity," Zara promised. "We know soil cultivation, crop rotation, and seed genetics. We can improve your yield significantly." Jake made his decision with the pragmatic speed that had kept his family alive on the frontier for 3 generations. "There's a bunkhouse behind the main building. Hasn't been used in years, but it's solid. You can stay there. Work starts at dawn." The transformation in the 5 aliens was immediate and profound. The eldest, Zara, actually pressed her hands together in the traditional Villani gesture of deep gratitude. "Human Jake Morrison, you risk much for strangers?" "Maybe," Jake replied, shouldering his rifle. "But my grandfather always said you judge a man by how he treats folks who can't do anything for him. Besides, I really do need the help." Over the following weeks, Jake discovered that Zara hadn't been exaggerating their abilities. The Villani possessed an almost mystical understanding of growing things that went far beyond his human knowledge. They could sense nutrients in soil by touch, predict weather patterns days in advance, and somehow encourage plants to grow stronger and more resilient. Under their guidance, Jake's wheat crop grew taller and fuller than any harvest in the farm's history. They introduced him to techniques passed down through generations of Villani farmers, showing him how to create natural fertilizers that enriched the soil rather than depleting it. But more than their agricultural expertise, the 5 aliens brought something Jake hadn't realized he'd been missing for years: companionship. After spending most evenings alone in his farmhouse, he found himself looking forward to dinners shared with his new workers. They told him stories of their homeworld, of crystal cities that grew like plants and oceans that sang with whale-like creatures. In return, Jake shared tales of human stubbornness, of colonists who had terraformed hostile worlds through sheer determination. The youngest, whom he learned was named Kira, had a particular fascination with human engineering. She spent her free time studying his broken harvesting drones, her large eyes bright with curiosity as she traced the mechanical systems. "Your people build things to fight," she observed one evening as they sat on Jake's porch watching the sunset. "Even your farming equipment is designed like weapons, strong, durable, meant to conquer the land rather than work with it." "Sometimes, that's what it takes," Jake replied, sipping his coffee. "This world wasn't exactly welcoming when my grandfather first arrived. Everything here wanted to kill him, from the soil chemistry to the native predators. Had to be tougher than the planet, if he wanted to survive." Kira nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps that is why your species succeeds where others fail. You do not accept defeat." "Or we're too stubborn to know when we're beaten," Jake said with a chuckle. It was during their 7th week on the farm that their peaceful existence was shattered. Kira was the first to spot the ships on the horizon. "Jake," she called, her voice tight with controlled fear. "Consortium vessels approaching." Jake stepped out of his farmhouse, his old rifle automatically finding its way into his hands. 3 sleek black ships descended with predatory grace, their hulls bearing the corporate logo of the Consortium Enforcement Division. They landed in his wheat field with casual disregard for the crops, their landing thrusters scorching perfect circles in his grain. Armed figures emerged from the lid ship, dressed in the black uniforms of Consortium security forces. Their leader, a tall human with the cold eyes of a professional enforcer, approached with obvious authority. "Farmer Morrison," the man announced, his voice amplified by his suit's speakers. "I am Commander Walsh, Consortium Enforcement Division. You are harboring fugitives from corporate justice. Surrender the Villani females, and there will be no charges filed against you." Jake spat in the dust and raised his rifle. "This is human," Territory, registered and claimed under Terran colonial authority. You boys are a long way from consortium space. Walsh's smile was cold as vacuum. The consortium has legal jurisdiction over Villani nationals wherever they may be found. These females are wanted for conspiracy and theft of corporate genetic property. That's interesting, Jake replied calmly, pulling out a datapad. Because, according to Colonial Settlement Law Section 23B, any being who works a registered claim for more than 6 weeks gains protected status under territorial sovereignty. These ladies have been working my land. That makes them residents of Kepler 442b under human protection. The commander's expression darkened with annoyance. Legal technicalities will not protect you when we have superior firepower. Behind Jake, the 5 Villani women had emerged from the farmhouse. Zara stepped forward, her voice carrying new strength and determination. Commander Walsh, she said clearly, we claim sanctuary under human law. We are no longer subjects of the worlds you conquered, but residents of this human colony under the protection of its laws and its people. The other 4 Villani women moved to stand beside her, forming a line between the consortium forces and Jake's farmhouse. It was a moment of quiet defiance that would echo across the galaxy, though none of them knew it at the time. Standing together, Commander. Walsh looked at the 5 Villani women with unconcealed contempt. You cannot simply declare yourselves human citizens. The consortium has legal claim to all Villani genetic research, including the knowledge these females possess. Jake stepped forward, keeping his rifle ready. Funny thing about human law, Commander. We tend to be pretty stubborn about it. You want them, you'll have to go through me. One human farmer against a consortium enforcement squad? Walsh laughed harshly. You cannot be serious. Maybe not just one farmer, Jake replied with a grim smile. He activated his communicator, broadcasting on the colony's emergency frequency. This is Jake Morrison at the Morrison farm. I've got consortium enforcement trying to kidnap my workers. Any neighbors feeling sociable today? The response came immediately. Tom Bradley's voice crackled over the comm from the next farm over. On my way, Jake, bringing my boys. Sarah Chen chimed in from her ranch to the south. Count us in too, nobody pushes around our neighbors. Within minutes, the sound of approaching vehicles echoed across the wheat fields. Pickup trucks, farm, haulers, and even an old military transport came roaring toward Jake's farm, kicking up clouds of dust. Dozens of human colonists emerged, many carrying rifles and wearing expressions of determined anger. Commander Walsh found himself facing not one stubborn farmer, but an entire community of humans who had learned to depend on each other for survival on the frontier. These weren't soldiers, but they were people who had carved civilization out of a hostile world through cooperation and mutual support. This is illegal interference with corporate law enforcement, Walsh declared, though Jake noticed his hand moving closer to his sidearm. This is human space, replied Sarah Chen, stepping up beside Jake with her own rifle. And these are our neighbors now. You want them? You go through all of us. Tom Bradley, a massive man who had served in the colonial Marines before becoming a farmer, crossed his arms and glared at the consortium troops. Seems to me you boys are trespassing. Maybe it's time you moved along. Behind the line of human colonists, the 5 Villani women watched in amazement. Never in their lives had they seen members of another species risk so much to protect them. On their homeworld, they had heard stories of human stubbornness and loyalty, but witnessing it firsthand was overwhelming. Kira, the youngest, whispered to Zara, "They barely know us. Why would they fight for us?" "Because that is what humans do," Zara replied with wonder in her voice. "They protect the weak, even against overwhelming odds." Commander Walsh's tactical computer was undoubtedly calculating the odds. 3 consortium ships with approximately 30 security troops against what appeared to be 60 armed colonists who knew the terrain intimately. The consortium had superior weapons and training, but the humans had the advantage of defending their own home ground. "You are making a serious mistake," Walsh warned. "The consortium has a long memory for those who interfere with our operations." Jake stepped forward, his weathered face hard as stone. "Let me tell you something about human memory, Commander. My grandfather fought in the Independence War against corporate rule. My father died defending this world from raiders. I've been protecting what's mine for 40 years. The consortium wants to threaten my neighbors, my workers, my home. He raised his rifle. Bring it on. The standoff stretched for long, tense minutes. Jake could feel sweat trickling down his back despite the cool evening air. These weren't pirates or raiders he was facing, but professional soldiers with military-grade equipment. If shooting started, people were going to die. It was Zara who broke the deadlock. The eldest of the Villani women stepped forward, placing herself between the two groups. "Commander," she said, her melodic voice carrying clearly across the field, "you claim we possess stolen corporate genetic knowledge. We challenge this claim under Galactic commerce law. We demand formal hearing with neutral arbitration." Walsh's eyes narrowed. "The consortium does not recognize Villani legal standing." "But you recognize human legal standing," Jake interjected, understanding Zara's strategy. "These women are now residents of a human colony. Under the colonial charter, I can petition the Terran Colonial Authority to represent them in any legal proceedings. Furthermore," added Sarah Chen, who had been a lawyer before becoming a rancher, "Galactic commerce law requires that any claim to intellectual property must be proven in open court. The consortium cannot simply declare ownership of living beings, knowledge without due process." Commander Walsh's jaw tightened with frustration. He was clearly a man more comfortable with direct action than legal maneuvering. But the presence of 60 armed humans had complicated his simple extraction mission considerably. "You cannot protect them forever," he warned. "The consortium has resources you cannot imagine." "Maybe," Jake replied. "But humans have something you don't. We stick together, and word of this is already spreading." He gestured to one of the colonists who was recording everything with a portable camera. "Funny how news travels fast these days. I bet within a few hours, every human world in the sector will know the consortium tried to kidnap refugee workers from a human farm." The commander's tactical computer was probably screaming warnings at him now. Public opinion mattered in the outer colonies, especially human public opinion. Humans had a tendency to remember grievances and act on them collectively. If the story spread that the consortium was persecuting alien refugees under human protection, it could spark incidents across dozens of worlds. "This is not over," Walsh declared, but Jake could hear the retreat in his voice. "No, it's not," Jake agreed. "But for today, you're leaving empty-handed." The consortium troops began withdrawing to their ships, their movements professional but clearly frustrated. As the black vessels lifted off, scorching Jake's wheat field once more, the assembled colonists let out a collective cheer, but Jake knew this was just the beginning. The consortium would be back, probably with lawyers and bureaucrats instead of soldiers next time. The 5 Villani women had gained a reprieve, not a victory. Over the following months, Jake's farm became something unexpected, a symbol of resistance. News of the standoff had indeed spread across human space, inspiring similar acts of defiance on other worlds. Humans began actively seeking out alien refugees, offering them work and protection under colonial law. The legal battle was complex and ongoing. Sarah Chen had taken the case pro bono, filing paperwork with the Terran Colonial Authority to establish formal recognition of the Villani women as human colonial residents. Other colonies began passing similar laws, creating a network of sanctuary worlds throughout human space. Meanwhile, the farm continued to thrive. The combination of human determination and Villani agricultural knowledge had created something remarkable. Jake's wheat yields had increased by 40%, and the soil was actually improving year by year under the aliens' careful cultivation techniques. Kira had finally fixed the old harvesting drones, combining human engineering principles with Villani biotechnology to create machines that worked with the crops rather than simply cutting them down. Her innovations were being studied by agricultural engineers across the sector. But perhaps the most significant change was in Jake himself. The lonely old farmer who had been contemplating the end of his family's legacy now found himself surrounded by an extended family that transcended species. The 5 Villani women had become not just his workers, but his friends, his advisors, and in many ways his daughters. One evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the wheat fields gold, Zara spoke quietly to Jake. "You saved us," she said. "Not just our lives, but our purpose. We were beginning to believe we were truly alone in the galaxy." Jake shook his head. "You saved yourselves. All I did was give you a chance to work." "No," Kira interjected, looking up from the tablet where she was designing improvements to the irrigation system. "You did something more important. You showed us that there are still species in the galaxy who judge others by their actions, not their origins." "That's what humans do," Jake replied with a shrug. "We're too stubborn to let bullies win." As the weeks turned to months, other alien refugees began arriving at Jake's farm. Word had spread through underground networks that there was a human who would give desperate beings a chance to work and rebuild their lives. Jake found himself running not just a farm, but an informal sanctuary. The consortium continued to challenge the legal status of the refugees through bureaucratic channels, but public opinion had turned against them. Human voters were making it clear that they supported their colonial government's sanctuary policies. Politicians who opposed refugee protection found themselves voted out of office. The transformation was remarkable. What had begun as one lonely farmer's decision to help, 5 desperate aliens had grown into a movement that was reshaping human space. Colonies that had been isolated and struggling began to flourish as alien knowledge and human determination combined to solve problems neither could have addressed alone. Years later, when historians studied the period, they would mark Jake Morrison's farm as the beginning of what became known as the Great Alliance. But on that quiet evening, as Jake sat surrounded by beings from a dozen different worlds, all working together to build something better, he wasn't thinking about history. He was thinking about his grandfather's words. "You judge a man by how he treats folks who can't do anything for him." It had seemed like simple frontier wisdom at the time. But perhaps, Jake reflected, the greatest victories began with the simplest acts of human decency. The wheat rustled in the evening breeze, and somewhere in the distance, he could hear the sound of children playing, human and alien children who would grow up together learning from each other, building a future that neither species could have imagined alone. That, Jake thought, was worth fighting for.